The judge wasn't messing around or playing any games when he wanted Alan to be punished. He wanted Alan's prison experience to be as hard as possible. He wanted Alan to feel real pain. Alan, along with a few other inmates, were then loaded into the prison truck. All of the other prisoners got sent to local prisons, so their journey was relatively short. Alan was the last to be dropped off because his journey was so far away. The prison driver laughed as he said to Alan, "You must have really upset the judge to be shipped out to a prison 5 hours away." Alan just held his head in his hands and broke down in tears, crying as he thought to himself, "What have I done? I can't believe I'm going to prison." After 5 hours had passed, Alan finally got to the prison. He was so scared because he had never actually seen a prison in real life before. The only time he saw anything to do with a prison was while he was watching a movie. When he finally got to the prison, he only spent 1 day on the induction wing. The next day, a prison officer opened Alan's cell door while saying, "Howdy, partner. I heard you are the tough guy. Usually for such short sentences like yours, we just let prisoners do their entire sentence on the induction wing, but I've heard so much about you, so since you are such a tough guy, we are going to fast track you by moving you into general population. You will be moved onto a wing with all the lifers and serious high-profile prisoners." Alan immediately got up and said, "Officer, I would just like to stay on the induction wing because it's nice and quiet. It's very peaceful, so this is the best wing for a guy like me." The officer smiled and laughed while saying, "A tough guy like you doesn't belong on the induction wing. A tough guy like you can't just go to prison and do his entire sentence on an easy induction wing. You need to experience what prison is really like." Alan replied, saying, "I'm not a tough guy, officer." The officer then said, "Of course you are a tough guy. I know all about you. The court officers told me all about you. They told me how you laughed in the judge's face and mocked him the entire time while you were in the courtroom. Doing something like that takes a lot of courage. What you did in that courtroom was gangster, so since you want to be a gangster, we are sending you to the worst wing in the prison. We are sending you to the gladiators wing. This wing is full of the most hardest, ruthless criminals, so it's the perfect place for a guy like you. Besides, if you're not really a gangster, this will be the perfect place to learn your lesson. If we just keep you on the induction wing, how will you ever learn anything? Because the induction wing is nice and cozy, which gives you a false perception of what prison life is really like. If you stay any longer on the induction wing, you will just think prison is a joke, and before you know it, you will be right back here again before we can blink. So you need to experience what prison is really like. So the best place to experience this is on the gladiators wing." The prison officer now had a smile on his face and was so excited that Alan was moving on to the gladiators wing. While looking at the prison officer, Alan noticed something different about his smile. He noticed the officer wasn't just smiling because he was feeling happy that day. He was smiling because he knew what was going to happen to Alan once he stepped foot onto the gladiators wing. The officer seemed to be enjoying every moment of this as he watched the instant fear appear on Alan's face after he told him he was moving on to the gladiators wing. Alan didn't have a clue how to fight and protect himself. In fact, he had never actually had a real fight in his life. The closest thing he had to a fight was shouting at his mom because she forgot to pay his phone bill on time. With no one to turn to and nowhere to run, Alan just packed his bags and got ready to move on to the gladiator's wing. As he was packing, he told himself the gladiator's wing can't be as bad as they say. Maybe the men on the wing are friendly. He started to convince himself of this while packing his bags, so by the time the guard came back he actually started to believe his delusional thinking. The prison officer then said, "Nice, you are all packed and ready to go, so let's go." The gladiator's wing was a 20-minute walk across the prison, but while walking with the guard, Alan started to notice something strange. Every time he would walk past other prisoners, they would blow kisses at him while smiling. Everyone seemed to be so happy to see him, so Alan thought to himself, maybe the gladiator's wing really isn't that bad after all. He continued to think this way until this happened. Once they got to the gladiator's wing, all the inmates were out of their cells. He arrived on the wing during social activities, so Alan could see everyone and everyone could see him. As soon as the inmates saw him, the entire wing went wild.